Thank you so much, and good morning to everybody. It's a real pleasure to join you here today. I'm joining from my office in the city of Oxford in the UK, and really glad of this opportunity to connect with you. So, I am going to be talking about, let me see, here we go. I'm going to be talking about Doughnut Economics and how we can escape outdated paradigms. I was a student of economics in the 1990s, and I became very frustrated by the theories that I was taught, and I want to share them with you today. Maybe you never studied economics. I want you to know the ideas that shape our world. Maybe you did study economics. You will find this familiar. So the first image that we were taught is the image of supply and demand. It places the market as a central concept first on the page. And it means that the metric that we focus on is price. And from then on, when we talk about the economy, we measure everything in financial value. This is a very limiting approach to measuring everything that matters. The selfie of humanity is a character called Rational Economic Man. His portrait is never drawn, but if it was, he would look something like this. He would be a man, standing alone, money in his hand, ego in his heart, a calculator in his head, nature at his feet. He hates work. He loves luxury. He knows the price of everything, and he can never get enough. These are the traits given to humanity in our economic theories. But if we really think we are like this, we have no chance of thriving here together, 8 to 10 billion people on this planet. We need a new portrait of humanity. And then the goal, what is the goal of the economy? It's never actually drawn or explicitly discussed, but it is in every politician's speech and every economist's advice. And it's the goal of growth, endlessly, no matter how rich a country already is. I'm sitting here in the United Kingdom, one of the richest countries in the history of humanity. But even our government here and in the United States and in Canada and Australia and across Europe, all of these governments believe that the solution to their problems lies in yet more growth. I believe these concepts have trapped us in an economic mindset and practice that is literally running down the living world and is undermining society. And we urgently need to replace them. We witness the challenges that arise from these theories in the crises that we've already experienced this century, just in the first 25 years. The financial meltdown of 2007 and 8 that nearly brought down the global financial system. The COVID lockdown that we all lived through. Climate and ecological breakdown, which is so pertinent, so closely experienced where many of you are in Rio Grande do Sul, across Brazil, across the world, the reality of climate and ecological breakdown. But also a crackdown against protesters. People who stand for life and stand up for communities are finding themselves confronted by the police, by the state. These crises emerge from the economic systems that we've created, systems that are focused on endless expansion and growth, that they undermine the very sources of life and our well-being. And so we urgently need to escape from these outdated paradigms. This is why I was motivated to write a book called Doughnut Economics and set out 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. And I will explain some of those. This book does not contain answers. It's not about policies. It's about a way of thinking. It's about a mindset that I believe equips us all for the future. And I've been honored and excited that many people have found the ideas in this book really valuable, from the zoologist David Attenborough to Pope Francis himself, to many communities and governments and teachers and businesses saying we want to put these ideas into practice. So I'm going to tell you about these ideas and hope that they have resonance for you where you are. Doughnut Economics is part of what people often call new economic thinking. It's one approach. There are many. Well-being is another approach. Circular economy, regenerative economy. Many of us find this inspiring to be involved in new economic thinking, but it's really important to remember that maybe this is not so new after all. The Maori scholar, Shane Edwards, calls it canoe economic thinking. It's a nice pun in English. We already knew this, say many indigenous cultures and worldviews, from buen vivir to gross national happiness in Bhutan, to Ubuntu in Africa, to He Ara Waori in the Maori community in the Pacific. So we need to connect and realize that what many of us raised in a Western mindset think of as new economics has long been known by many cultures, the deep patterns of regenerative and distributive design. Let me introduce you to the donut. If you think of it as a compass for human prosperity and for resilience, imagine humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the center of that circle. This means the hole in the middle of the donut is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life, where people do not have the resources they need for food, water, health, education, and many other essentials. These I crowdsourced from the Sustainable Development Goals. So the governments of the world have already agreed that every person in the world has a right to live above this space, over the social foundation. But as we seek to meet our needs and our wants, we start to put pressure on the life-supporting systems of our planet, on the ecological ceiling. And so we risk going over that and going beyond the 9 planetary boundaries recognized by Earth system scientists as the life-supporting systems that make life work with stability on this only known living planet in the universe. So in simple terms, the goal of the donut is to leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot Earth's limits. We want to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. And the goal, you can see already, has changed a lot. The goal is not endless growth measured in financial value. The goal is thriving in balance between the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. It's a bit like a heartbeat. We know that our bodies thrive when they are in balance. So can we take what we know from the human body to the planetary body and see that the success of an economy will be one that brings us into balance? It's a big contrast. When I first drew this diagram, I realized that the circle echoed many long-standing cosmovisions and symbols from many cultures of thriving, of well-being, as you can see here. And it's a big contrast to the Western concept of thriving and success, which has been growth. So now I think of the donut as like a bridge. Can it provide a bridge for those of us raised with the Western mindset focused on endless growth? Can it help us bridge back towards other ways of knowing, towards a deep, regenerative thriving that other cultures have long known? If the goal is to thrive in balance, we are very far from that right now. And all of the red in the image shows us this. Billions of people are falling short on life's essentials. That's the red going into the middle of the circle. We want to eliminate that red so no one is falling short. But we also are overshooting many planetary boundaries and need to come back within those planetary boundaries. So this is a double challenge: to eliminate human shortfall and ecological overshoot at the same time. Generations before us didn't see this challenge. So their economic theories didn't try to respond to it. Their government policies weren't designed for it. Their businesses weren't designed for it. We need to redesign for our own times. I just showed you the world, but let me bring it down to national level. Researchers have created 150 national donuts, and here are just four: Malawi, Brazil, China, the United States. Four countries, a huge difference in their level of income per person. Malawi, massive human shortfall, but not overshooting any of the planetary boundaries. Brazil has both social shortfall and ecological overshoot, as does China. And the United States, even on the high income it has high inequality and poverty domestically and massive ecological overshoot. Let me put these in a scatter plot. The place here where every country should be aiming to be is in the top left-hand corner. That is where all countries rise up to meet the needs of all of their people, but they do so while coming back within planetary boundaries. So you can see that there isn't a single country that's there yet. Costa Rica is closer than any other. And next time you hear yourself or somebody else talking about developed countries, you can challenge them. Where do you mean? There's not a single country in this image that should be calling itself developed, because there's nothing developed about overshooting planetary boundaries. Here are the four countries I showed you earlier, spread across that whole scatter plot. And let's just recognize that even though countries appear like separate dots on this screen, they are profoundly connected from histories of colonialism. I have to recognize this as a British person in the United Kingdom. Military and corporate power, which is so dominant today. Trade and finance rules, resource extraction, climate change impacts, current and future. Our countries' histories are intertwined through history and through into the future. Now, when we focus on growth, growth tends to take nations in this direction, first towards the donut, but then straight past it. It doesn't take countries into the donut, if that is the goal. Here is data from 1992 to 2015 for many different countries. And you can see across this scatter plot, countries are going past the donut corner. They are not yet moving into it. I like to quote the systems thinker Donella Meadows. When anyone calls for growth, she says, always ask, growth of what? And why? And for whom? And who pays the cost? And how long can it last? And what's the cost to the planet? And how much is enough? And we can ask these questions in every country, in every context where people are calling for growth. We should be able to answer them. Instead of going straight past the donut, we need to transform the direction of nations' journeys. Can we see low-income countries rise up and get into the donut instead of shooting straight past it? That's not the historic path that others have taken. Can middle-income countries meet the needs of their people while already coming back within the donut? And high-income countries, like where I am, finally reduce that massive ecological overshoot and meet the needs of all of their people, because they certainly have the resources to do so. This will definitely call for a significant rebalancing between nations. What do I mean by rebalancing? Many things. It could mean reparations, return of stolen land, redistributing wealth and technology, renegotiating trade and finance rules that are stacked against low-income countries, rebalancing global institutional power. Some of this seems to be underway today, but a lot of it is not yet happening. If we really want to get into the donut, what is the mindset that we would want to be bringing? What would we want today's students to learn? For me, this is the first diagram that I would teach. Never supply and demand. This I call the embedded economy diagram. What is it showing us? That the economy is a subset of human society. It is a human construct. We invented it and we can redesign it. And human society is a subset of the living world. We are part of nature and utterly dependent upon her health. And so the economy is embedded in the living world and therefore must be aligned with the flows of resources. We can see from the arrows here, the economy brings in living matter and materials. It puts out waste. It's bathed in a river of solar energy. The economy must be designed so that it is aligned with, compatible with, living within planetary boundaries, living within the donut. But also when we look inside the economy, yes, there is the market and the state. Much of economic discussion is like a boxing match between these two. But we mustn't lose sight of the household, the unpaid care, where we begin every day with the cooking, the washing, the cleaning, the sweeping, raising the children, the unpaid caring work, often performed by women, that makes life work. And also we shouldn't miss the commons, where people come together as a community and co-create things that they value. So this is a starting point for thinking about the kind of economy that we want to create. It's like a map. If the donut is a compass, this is the map. But we also need to care about the dynamics of the economy. We have inherited economies thanks to the linear industrial systems that we are a part of that are degenerative by design. They take Earth's resources, make it into stuff we want, use it for a while and throw it away. This take, make, use, lose. This is what is running down the living planet, pushing us over planetary boundaries. The major fossil fuel industries, the mining, construction, chemical industries, consumerism, all created through this degenerative chain. We urgently need to move from degenerative design to regenerative design, shown here with two loops on the side, the biological and the technical nutrients, so that resources are not used up, they're used again and again, far more carefully, more collectively, more creatively, and more slowly. And this will enable us to work with and within the cycles of the living world. What could this look like in practice? Just a few examples from around the world in the field of urban design. Ecological construction of houses, whether it's in India, in the US, in Baltimore, or in Amsterdam. Using building materials that can be used again and again, using natural building materials where possible. And here the sponge city of Jinhua, a city that knows it will be flooded, so building in natural bodies around it that can absorb the water when the flooding comes, knowing that human settlements are nestled within the living world. So these are just a few examples of regenerative design in the urban space. At the same time as going from degenerative to regenerative, we've also inherited economies that tend to be divisive. They capture value and opportunity in the hands of the very few. This gives rise to the 1%. It gives rise to the billionaires. And there is no way that humanity can get into the donut in such an unequal world as we have today, where the richest 1% of people own half of the world's wealth. It's impossible. We must create economies that become far more distributive by design, sharing value and opportunity with everybody who co-creates it. What could this look like in practice? Let me share examples again, just from the space of urban design. Social housing, such as here in the city of Vienna. Most people in Vienna live in housing that is owned by the city. It's affordable, it's central, it's normal, because the city decided 100 years ago that housing should not be a luxury investment asset for the rich. It should be a human right for everybody. These half houses in Chile are the design of the architect Alejandro Aravena. He realized that many people could not afford to buy a house, but they could afford to buy half a house. So he built half houses with all the plumbing and electricity that you needed. And then people could save up over time and fill in the rest of their house. Even just changing the architectural design of a building opened up home ownership to many, many people who otherwise couldn't afford it. Here I'm showing the very famous rapid transit from Curitiba in Brazil, which has been copied by many cities around the world, prioritizing public transit, and also installing solar cooperatives in Cleveland, making high-skilled work available and skilling up people in communities that have traditionally been marginalized from that work. So reaching out to the lower income Black community in Cleveland, Ohio, and putting them at the center of the new skills economy. So we need to go from degenerative to regenerative and from divisive to distributive. In fact, we can see that we've left behind the 20th century economics that I began with, and we can replace it with the 21st century economics that starts with the economy embedded in the living world, the self-portrait of humanity as social, adaptable humans embedded in the web of life. And the goal is not endless growth. It's to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. So far I've shown you some ideas, but we really need to take ideas off the page and put them into practice. And for me, this became a very exciting thing when cities and towns around the world started to work with the donut. It began in 2019. The city of Amsterdam wanted to put the concept of doughnut economics at the heart of their strategy for a circular city. So they created their own Dutch donut and put it at the center of their policy. 6 weeks later, the city of Copenhagen, nearby, voted to explore what it would mean like for them. And then the city of Brussels in Belgium and Barcelona. It began to spread. And today there are over 50 cities and towns and districts around the world that have put doughnut economics into practice as the local government. So this is about local governments formally adopting it and making it part of their vision or their strategy or their processes. Let me show you a few examples. Here's examples from all around the world, from Ipoh in Malaysia to Barcelona to Tomelilla in Sweden, Thimphu in Bhutan. We've had gatherings bringing together these policymakers from across the world because they learn from each other. They are the pioneers and they can best teach each other how to put it into practice in their own context. Here's Barcelona. They created their own local version of the donut and are using it as part of an ambitious policy to take the cars out of the city center and bring back nature and trees and community. In Ipoh in Malaysia, they aim to be the first city living in the donut. It's a middle-income country, a smaller city, and they are really excited about saying, how can we be a unique city in our country with this ambition? In Bhutan, the government said, of everything we see coming out of Western economics, we find the donut very connected to our concept of gross national happiness. So we want to use them both together and envision a future for Thimphu, the capital city. And the cartoons you can see on the right are by a Bhutanese artist imagining a regenerative and distributive future of the city of Thimphu. This is a well-being future, and they're aiming to move towards that from now. In the county of Cornwall in the UK, they turned it into a decision-making wheel. On the left, every project that the county is considering, maybe it's a bicycle route or a new road, they put the project through this decision-making wheel, asking themselves, is it going to improve the social and ecological outcomes here or undermine them? And on the right, you can see they're measuring progress over time. You can see just from the colors of what's getting better, what's getting worse, and what hasn't changed. And this is a much richer reading, much more information than somebody just telling you what's happened to the GDP of a place. So we're starting to measure life in her own terms, in human metrics and the natural world's metrics. We've documented all of this in a report called Cities and Regions, Let's Get Started, if anybody's interested. And it's also available in Brazilian Portuguese, I'm very pleased to say, because we know that the best way to learn is from other people like yourself. So we are seeing local governments learning from one to another. Peer-to-peer inspiration is a major source of spreading these ideas. There are lots of community-led networks across the world also that have been started. You can see Doughnut Brazil right there at the top. If you're interested, you could go on our platform, doughuteconomics.org. You could join Doughnut Brazil, see who else is there. What are they doing? Can you collaborate with them? This is popping up all over the world. Here's one example in Melbourne, in Australia. They suffered terrible wildfires in the city over several years, to the point that people said there has to be a different vision of the future. And they created this organization called Regen Melbourne, using the donut as their compass. They measured it. They had deep community conversations about it, and now have come up with a vision for the future of Melbourne, reorienting around this. They want to make the river in the city centre, you can see the photo. What if it was swimmable? That's a Photoshop image. There aren't people swimming in the river today. This is a dream. They want to grow food in the local streets, build community. So they're using the donut as part of a really positive vision, moving away from the crisis that they felt. So there are many cities and districts and schools and communities and states aiming to find their way towards the donut. But it's not easy. You know, there are policies and regulations that might be in the way, global politics and finance. There's inertia, geopolitical pressure, a lack of funding, burnout. So it's very easy to feel that we are getting stuck. And then the journalists call up and say, where is there a place that's already living in the donut? As if it could just happen like that overnight. People say, well, show me the visible results that have been achieved so far. I need to see the evidence on the ground. Or how can you prove that this new economy is going to work? Why isn't it all happening faster? So many people trying to make change happen feel this pressure to show results now. And I think it's important to take a long view on this. I'm going to go back to 1947, when Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek got together with some economists in a Swiss village called Mont Pelerin, and they wanted to give birth to a new economic ideology that they called neoliberalism. So back in 1947, this was a dream. And Milton Friedman knew that it might take some time. Listen to what he says. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function: to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes politically inevitable. So in 1947, neoliberal economics was the politically impossible. But Milton waited, and he had a strategy. He and his colleagues seeded the ideas in many institutes that they created around the world, funded by corporate interests that would benefit in the long term. They created positions of long-term tenure in universities, professorships, so that the ideas were being spoken by people in places of influence. And it was in 1980 when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were finally elected in almost the same year, that the ideas of neoliberalism really came fully onto the world stage and have dominated it ever since. But I think it's really valuable to look back to this story to remember that it was never, it wasn't always there. At one time, Milton Friedman thought it was politically impossible, but he waited 33 years. We don't want to wait 33 years, but we know it takes time for new ideas to be adopted. So what if those ideas aren't just lying around? We want them to be up and running. That's why at Doughnut Economics Action Lab, we work with pioneers who are actually doing it. Our name being Action Lab is a very intentional name. It's all about the action. We know that the most convincing and irresistible evidence is other people doing what you thought was impossible, but they're already doing it. And so we focus on highlighting the work of these pioneers, championing their work to others. Let me give you some more quotes for inspiration for where you are. Donella Meadows is one of the mothers of systems thinking. And she asked, how do you change paradigms? You keep pointing at the anomalies and failures of the old paradigm. You keep speaking and acting loudly and with assurance from the new one. You insert people with the new paradigm in places of public visibility and power. You don't waste time with reactionaries. You work with active change agents and the vast middle ground of people who are open-minded. I find this very inspiring in informing the work that I do. And it reminds me that every time somebody in the community of Doughnut Economics Action Lab shares the concepts, introduces them in a talk, we are helping to reshape somebody's worldview. We are influencing minds. And many, many people are ready to change their mind. Many people want to think differently and move into this space of new economics. Howard Zinn was a fantastic historian, especially of the United States. And he said, the leaps that man has made in social evolution came from those who acted as if they were going to win, as if the vision they had was already realized. In the UK, we always look to the suffragettes, the women who marched demanding the right to vote. They were often carried away by police, and they would say, we don't come here to break the law. We come here to make the law. They held themselves with a conviction that they knew that they were right and that they knew they were going to win. I think Mahatma Gandhi did the same thing in India when he stood up to the British Empire and told the Brits that they had to go home and leave and let India become herself. The dignity he always held, he acted as if it was already clear that they would win, and it worked. In the United States, these young men sitting at a counter in a cafe, knowing that they would be removed because of racial segregation, but they dared to sit there knowing that the long arc of history was on their side, knowing that ultimately they would win. So we can ask ourselves, what does it mean for us in this generation today to act as if we too will succeed, to act as if the paradigm and the vision we stand for is already clearly real around us? Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to be elected to the Congress of the United States. And she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. I love this quote, the determination to make your voice heard anyway. So we often ask ourselves, how can you bring a folding chair? Can you create a new table or host your own festival or create a new prize? Write your own newspaper, create some metrics, find different ways of making the world visible that you begin to get yourself a seat at that table. And the last quote I want to share with you is from the chemist Ilya Prigogine. He said, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. And so we often ask ourselves, how can we connect up the potential of our many small islands? Who are the islands around us? At Doughnut Economics Action Lab, we often say, don't try to be the movement, join the movement. It's much bigger than us. So it's part of connecting up these islands. And that brings me all the way back to where I began, seeing the connection between many different kinds of thinking that we call new economic thinking, whether it's doughnut economics or well-being, circular economy, or regenerative economy, but also recognizing that it's connected to people in cultures and in worldviews and indigenous societies that have long known these deep patterns that we are now trying to return to from a Western mindset. Can we bridge across to that wisdom? Can we reconnect with it? This, I think, is the work ahead. And so I offer you the tools and the concepts of our platform at doughnut-economics.org. You are very welcome to browse on the platform. Just look and see what's there. We all the more welcome people to join as a member of the community, to discover who else is out there, to connect with people like yourself, to take these tools and start putting them into practice. And even better, to share back that practice, because we know that the most irresistible reason to get involved is because you see somebody like yourself doing that thing that you thought was impossible. So I've given you a very quick tour of the concepts of doughnut economics. I hope that they land with you from the doughnut itself through regenerative and distributive design, but also showing not only how new concepts can be valuable, but how important it is to take them off the page and put them into practice, and to work with pioneers who are showing the way of how to put these ideas into practice. Because this, I believe, is the way that we can make ideas spread at the speed and at the scale that the times that we are in demand. We know that there are crises coming. Many places have already suffered devastating crises. So how do we turn from an era of crisis to an era of a new vision? These ideas are part of that solution. So let me stop here with many thanks for listening. And I very much look forward to the conversation and any questions that this may bring. Thank you very much indeed.